China's official PMI dropped to 50.6 in April from 50.9 in March. This fresh data reveals a slowdown in manufacturing activity that was led by a slump in new export orders. Now, to discuss this with me in further detail, I am joined on the line today by Amy Zhuang, Senior Analyst at Nordea Markets in Copenhagen. Hi there, Amy, and thank you for joining us today. So even though this is only a slight fall, many are concerned over the speed and stability of economic recovery. Amy, are you concerned about this data and what it tells us about the Chinese economy?
We are, compared to some of the market participants, are less concerned based on this data. Because first of all, if you look at the PMI as a whole, it is still above 50. And if you look at the sub-indices, most of them are still above 50. Actually, the output is still quite strong, and the new orders. The only kind of dark point is the export orders, which we have always expected and have always argued that it is the sector that remains vulnerable in the Chinese economy and the Chinese recovery path this time. This is, of course, much related to the uncertain situation in the global recovery, and probably China is also hit by the intensified tension around its neighbors. With there are the Korean tensions, and also the island dispute with Japan, and so on. So there are a lot of factors that affect China's exports, and we have kind of expected this.
And the PMI data showed a significant drop in purchase prices in April that could actually provide some type of peace of mind to Chinese companies who are struggling to cope with shrinking margins. Now, do you think this big fall is actually positive for Beijing's current pro-growth strategy?
Definitely. Since China is pretty much a net purchaser of everything, and particularly for commodities, so a fall of these input prices, of course, will help the Chinese companies and manufacturers. And we probably could expect to see some big purchases or some building up of the inventories of the inputs, because that's what many of the manufacturers have done in the past. Is that when they see price level at a satisfying level, they start to purchasing in, which not necessarily reflect their own expectation on the future sales. It's just a matter of purchasing in to according to price levels. But definitely that will help their profits particularly much, which some of them are, especially the manufacturers, are a little bit squeezed on the profit side. But we've just actually come home from a 2 weeks trip in China, and meeting many companies based there, mainly in the consumer sector. And most of them are quite positive on their future sales growth, still about 15 to 20%. So I would say that the prospect, especially for this segment of the companies, is not pretty. It's not very dark.
And finally, investors will be closely watching other data, such as Chinese industrial production, retail sales, and fixed asset investment. Now, these are all coming out over the next 2 weeks. Amy, what are you expecting to see from this data?
I would say that we expect the retail sales and the fixed asset investment to be held at a pretty reasonable, pretty decent levels in the past. So definitely the fixed asset investments will be around or slightly above 20%. Industrial production may see a little disappointment there. It's mainly because of the what's suggested by the PMIs lately. Yes, and that's of course also because industrial production is also much export-oriented. So when the export sector is struggling, and that will of course have a negative spillover on the domestic industrial production. But overall, on the macro data from China in the coming month or two, I expect the data to be quite, how will I say, not very bullish, because there are still many uncertainties in the recovery path. But I definitely do not expect anything close to a hard landing or anything.
Thank you very much, Amy. Well, viewers, do stay tuned to Dukascopy TV, especially if you are interested in gaining insight into the performance of some G10 currency pairs, as my colleague Navji Gurwal will be having a look at the dollar-yen, euro-pound and the cable in today's Targets in Focus. But for now, goodbye.